move through. If you have questions, comments, you can use the chat today, or just unmute and talk to us. Want to make this as interactive as possible. But for those of you, there's a few of you that I don't know as I was looking over the registration. So my name is Kelly Thompson, and I currently am the director of the Project Prevent Safe Place grant here at GREC. But along with that, I have other hats that I wear as well. And so I guess this is one of them. So happy to be with you today to go through and update certified evaluation training with you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, and I will tell you as well, I did work with Jenny Ray at the Kentucky Department of Education on developing this training. So if any of you are familiar with her, she's also been doing this training in some of the other co-ops around the state as well. So we're just going to dive in this morning. All right, so to get us started, if you would please, this will be our digital sign-in sheet for today. I'll also drop the link in the chat. So if you would just take a moment to either use the QR code reader or the link and just go ahead and sign in, that would be wonderful. And while you're doing that, I will say, if you see my head turning, it's just because I have two computers up, so I can monitor chat a little bit easier. And I also have John Strode with me today, so he's going to be supporting us some throughout the day as well. So you may see me even turn and say something to him. So, but anyway, so once you get signed in, thank you very much. And I'll try to, anybody that hops on later, we'll try to get them signed in as well. All right, so as I was thinking about the day and all of the stresses and struggles that you're going through in your district, I know that this is probably not the most pleasant place for you to have to be today. And I know that you're going to be pulled and you're going to be having people come to talk with you, all of those things. And I totally understand that. And my hope today is that you can engage in this training as much as possible. But I also understand that that might not, happen for the entire day. So I wanted to start out with just a little laugh. You've probably seen this before, but I think this is how we are all feeling right now with everything that we have going on.
This man right here is my great-grandfather. He's the first cat herder in our family.
Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy.
Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-wild short hairs, well, that's another thing altogether.
Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning right here, and if you look at his face, it's just ripped to shreds, You
see the movies, you hear the stories, I'm living a dream. Not everyone can do what we do.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and you ain't lost a one of them, ain't a feeling like it in the world.
All right, so I don't know, anybody have a thought about that video? I would love to hear a comment this morning before we just dive in, so just feel free.
I think some of our cats may have rabies.
Oh Oh, exactly. I think it is important for us to laugh a little bit through the day. I think sometimes that keeps us sane on these virtual trainings. So, but yes, yes. And I think sometimes, you know, as educators, it is like herding cats. It's like herding cats when we're not even dealing with COVID. So COVID has just added a whole new level to that. So, but anyway, so glad that you're with me today. If you want to also just drop your name and district in the chat, just to let everybody know who's with us. I'm not going to take time for us all to introduce ourselves because I want to just jump in and hopefully, you know, get you out earlier today if possible as well. So just add your name in there, district, and we're just happy to have you today. And glad to meet some new people and see some friends as well on here. So, all right. So on the screen, you're going to see a resource page. All right. And so throughout the day, I'm going to be asking you to access some documents. All right. And so this is where you're going to access them from. So on the resource page, what I would like for you to do is if you would just go ahead and open that up in a tab. All right. So you'll have access to that. So when you need to go open something up, then you'll have that there. Okay. Sorry, let me go back to it there. All right, so if you need access to that anytime throughout the day, just let us know and we'll drop it back in the chat to make sure that you have access to that. So, but that's going to be our resource page that has all the links to everything that we're using today. And so that'll be something that you'll want to have even after the training. All right, so we're just going to dive right in and we're going to talk a little bit, you know, today about evaluations. This is an update training for you. So this is not anything new for you. Most of you've probably been doing it several years, but I always think it is important for us to revisit and to rethink how we handle evaluations, you know, how we conduct observations within the district and within our schools and making them the most beneficial that they can be. And, you know, as I say that, you know, there's really two ways, all right? Just like you see the two roads here, there are two ways, all right? So we can either do evaluations that are collaborative, where we really support teachers and we support their professional growth. So it's actually doing these evaluations with teachers, all right, versus just for compliance, all right, to where we're doing them to teachers, all right. So the things that we're going to talk about today are really going to lead toward how do we support and grow our teachers. And I think that would be the goal of any of us as an evaluator is how do we work with teachers to help them improve their practice and be the best that they can be, you know, for the students in our district. So that's going to be our focus throughout the day. A little bit about our agenda here. So we're going to start out this morning. Now, when we are virtual, it's hard to gauge the times. So I'm going to say that while we might not stay right on these times, depending on where we're at around 11 to 11:30, we'll break for lunch. All right, but that kind of lets you see what we're going to be focusing on today. This morning, we're going to be looking at quality evidence, and we're going to be thinking about observer biases. We're going to do a refresher on 3B from the framework from teaching. And then we're going to dive in and we're going to watch some teacher videos, and we're going to do some calibration together today, just to make sure that we're all on the same page with the types of evidence that we're gathering when we're in observations. And then when lunchtime comes, you know, I want to get you out as quickly as possible today. And it is too difficult to stay on a Zoom session for a total of 6 hours. So I have built in some asynchronous independent learning through lunchtime. So there will be a couple of items that I'll ask you during your hour lunch to view, and then we'll talk about those when we come back after lunch. And then we'll also have an opportunity to have some additional resources at the end of the day, which can continue on to some additional asynchronous independent learning for you at that time as well. So that's kind of our schedule for the day, our agenda. But like I said, feel free to jump in at any time if you have a question or a thought. All right, so we're going to start this morning by really talking about this relentless focus on quality evidence. All right, so when I think about quality evidence, there's one thing that comes to my mind, and I don't know, I know some of you are because I've worked with you. Some of you are familiar with the Harvard practice of instructional rounds. And so when I'm thinking about quality evidence, it takes me back to my training around instructional rounds. All right, so we're going to spend just a few minutes talking about the ladder of inference. Several of you, I'm sure, have heard of the fifth discipline and this ladder of inference. But the big thing that I want to point out here is, you know, I'm going to reference this ladder of inference throughout the day. So sometimes I'll say, oh, let's make sure we're not, you know, we don't need to move up that ladder, okay, too quickly during our observation times and evaluation. So what the ladder of inference actually does is it describes the thinking process that we go through, usually not even realizing it. All right. So not just in observations, but just in our daily lives. All right. So it's just the way that we get from a fact to a decision or an action that we're going to do. And so the ladder is made up of 7 rungs, and you can see those there on your screen. And those 7 rungs outline a really rapid process that our minds go through to make conclusions and to take actions in a given situation. All right. So at the bottom, you know, is just the observation. Okay, it's just the observation. And so we start out with just those experiences. So if we're thinking about going into a classroom and doing an observation, that is really the first step. What are the actual facts? And the observation, the lowest rung of the ladder, is where we need to stay when we are actually in classrooms doing observations. All right. But the thing that happens is it's really easy as soon as we go in that we see something and we automatically want to jump up that ladder of inference and start making assumptions or start drawing conclusions. And we want to be careful not to do that. We want to be careful that while we're in classrooms, while we're doing these observations, that we're always just gathering the facts. All right. That's where we start out. And that's the most important part. All right. And then as we move up, then at the second step, that's where our minds will automatically and constantly be filtering out. All right. So we see this data, we see facts, we see things happening. And that's where we will start selecting data that's important to us based on our own beliefs and our prior experiences. So that's another thing that we need to realize, that the way we see things might not be the same way that other people see those. So we always need to be conscious of that as well. Then we move up to meaning. And at that third step, we assign or we really interpret the meaning of the data that we've collected. All right. Then we move on up to assumptions. And, you know, the assumptions, sometimes even without considering them, we just base things on what we automatically know. All right. Our interpretation of a situation. So those are our assumptions. And then from there, we jump up to conclusions. And at that fifth step, we really start drawing conclusions about those interpretations and those assumptions that we've made. Then we continue up that ladder of inference, and there's where our beliefs come in. And, you know, based on our conclusions, we affirm or we adjust our beliefs about the situation, about what we observed, okay, and just the world around us. And then finally, when we get to the top, that's where we take action. All right, we take action that seems right to us based on our beliefs. All right, and so we want to make sure that, you know, we see this process just continuing. All right, we observe. All right, and then we constantly are going up the rungs of the ladder. But the problem is that we act sometimes as if other people see the world the same as we do. All right, so any of us can go into a classroom and we're going to have different thoughts and we're going to make different conclusions based on our beliefs. And so that's the reason it's so important that when we're in classrooms that we're only collecting facts, all right, that we're very careful not to automatically jump up to inferring something or making an assumption. And I'll give you an example of this. So if you walk into a classroom, depending on your style of teaching, but if you walk into a classroom and students are up, they're moving around, they're talking, it seems maybe a little chaotic, then you might jump up to that inferring and you might make an assumption that that teacher doesn't have classroom management skills based on what you saw as soon as you walked in the classroom. But if you capture exactly what you see and exactly what you hear while you're in that classroom, you may find out that students are having authentic conversations about the work and they are engaged in the work and they are completing what the teacher has assigned them to do. You know, I often say when I go into a classroom, how do I know if students are truly cognitively engaged? All right. And it doesn't have anything to do with them sitting in a chair, looking forward at the teacher and being very quiet. If I personally want to know if a student is cognitively engaged, I need to hear what they're thinking. I need to hear what they're saying to their neighbors or to their teachers. So I need to hear from those students. So sometimes I think we have our own ideas about what the perfect classroom looks like when we really should go into a classroom with an open mindset about what we're going to see and the data that we're going to collect. And then how can we take those actual facts of what we see and what we hear to really help support that teacher in becoming more effective. All right, so I'm going to stop there just for a moment. What does anybody have any thoughts about the ladder of inference or how that affects you when you are in classrooms and you're doing observations? I would love to hear if anybody has done any work around this ladder of inference or how that maybe affects you. I have really good wait time.
I do like the fact that you've reminded us to go into these classrooms with an open mind, because sometimes I do think we take our own biases into the classroom, just based on what we used to do as classroom teachers, what we assume are good practices. And I really like that you reminded us to make sure that we're hearing what the students are thinking and hearing what the students are doing, and not just make those assumptions based on what we see.
And yes, I think it is very important. And you know, I visit a lot of classrooms, and I always try to get in that mindset before I go into the classroom. All right. Because a lot of times even when I visit, you know, someone may have already told me something about the classroom that I'm going to visit. And I always try to put that to the back of my mind, because I always want to give that teacher maybe just the benefit of the doubt there. Or if somebody says that this is going to be the best classroom you have ever seen, well, it may be, but I want to base that on the actual observation data that I collect while I'm in there. And so that is truly just facts, exactly what you see and exactly what you hear while you're in there. Because, and we're going to get more into that as we move along, but yes, I think we do need to keep an open mind, all right, and just realize that everyone looks at things through a different lens sometimes. But when you capture exactly what you hear and what you see, it makes us less likely to be able to jump to conclusions or infer, infer something. So anytime we make those assumptions and come to those conclusions, they always need to be based on those facts from that observation. So that's where we're going with this. We want to make sure, you know, when we say this relentless focus on quality evidence, that really means focusing on evidence that's observable, all right, and really excluding anything, any evaluative comments that are not evidence. So that's what we need to remember anytime, we walk into a classroom for an observation. And then I really I love this slide, and I think it's something that you'll want to pay close attention to. Anytime we are capturing data from a classroom, observation data, and I've coached a lot of administrators around this work, and even teachers, like during peer conferences or peer observations, and I always say there are some key words and phrases that we need to avoid, that we don't need to write down, and it's things like I think or I feel, because those are opinions. So we shouldn't be writing down, I think students are engaged, or I feel like students love being at school. Well, what is it that actually caused you to believe that? That's what you actually write down. All right. Things like great job or it went well. All right. What is the actual evidence that causes you to come to that conclusion? That's what you need to capture. All right. Could have been better if. Engaged, out of control, well behaved. All right. All of these comments are just opinions. All right. So what happens is we're jumping up that ladder of inference and we're giving meaning. All right. But it's not the evidence. So when we're in those classrooms, we're capturing the evidence. All right. The inferring and the conclusions and the assumptions, all of that comes later. All right. But the evidence is exactly what you hear and exactly what you see. All right. So, I see this a lot. Well, it was too slow and, they need to speed up. Well, what causes us to believe that? I mean, so there's reasons for that. Did the teacher spend 10 minutes on an opening activity? all right, when the class was a 30-minute class and they spent 10 minutes, you know, on an opening activity. So you have to write exactly what you see and exactly what you hear, because that's what's going to help a teacher, all right, when you have that post-conference with them. So here's a few more just to stay away from. And we'll revisit this slide several times throughout the day, just as a reminder as we're capturing evidence and we're doing some calibration. I'll remind you of some of these phrases and words to make sure that we stay away from. All right, so now we're going to do a little practice here. So keywords and phrases to avoid. We went through that. And now I'm going to share with you some actual evidence, comments that were captured during an observation. And what I would like for you to do is to think about what is the evidence, what are the words that are ambiguous, that are unclear, all right, that are not exact, all right? And so I want us to pick out some of those. So on this first one, students on carpet during mini lesson, lots of students walking around the classroom while the teacher tried to get their attention. All right, so I'm going to do the first one here. All right, so when I look at this one, lots of students walking around the classroom. Well, when we say a lot, what do we mean? Is that 2 or 3, or is that 15 out of 20? I mean, you know, so be specific. So lots of students walking around the classroom. And then teacher tried. All right, so that also is problematic language, because we need to know exactly what the teacher did. All right, so that's what you want to capture. Okay. All right, let's look at the next one here. All right, so I would just like for you to use the chat, or if you prefer, you can just unmute and talk. But let's take a look at these two, and what problematic language do you see here? Teacher asked questions about the calendar. Many students were not listening while the teacher reviewed the days of the week. Great, yes, many students. Okay. How many? And when it says they were not listening, you're exactly right. What were they doing? All right, that caused you to think that they were not listening? Because I'm pretty safe to say that sometimes students are listening when we don't think that they are actually listening. All right, so what were they actually doing that caused us to believe that they were not listening? Yes. Specific questions. I love that. And you know, I think it's important, and I always say this when I'm coaching people about doing observations, and it's something that I do when I'm in a classroom. I just capture things that the teacher says. You know, I sometimes make my columns, you know, teacher and student, kind of like this screen shows, and I just jot down, you know, exactly those questions that the teacher's asking, exactly what the students are saying. If they're asking questions, exactly what those questions are. So yes. So we're doing this activity just because we want to get more comfortable in just capturing the facts while we're in classrooms. So let's look at another one. Stephen called out over and over again when you asked the question about the days of the week. Do you see anything there that is not as clear as it should be, or that you have questions about? Yes, over and over again. Thanks, Tanya. Yes, Donna. Over and over again. What does that mean? All right. How many times? All right. Just be more specific. Just be more specific. So let's look at the next one. Stephen walked away from the group and the class fell apart. Yes, what does fell apart mean? All right. What happened in that class that caused you to infer that the class fell apart? All right. Need to be specific. All right, let's do the next one. Mini lesson is not successful. Little student learning accomplished as the teacher has no classroom management skills. All right, not successful, little student learning. Exactly. All right. Yeah, and I even like that, no classroom management skills. What caused you to say they did not have any classroom management skills? What were the things that were happening in that class that led you to infer that, that led you to believe that? All right. All right, here's the next one. Poor classroom management continues through sloppy transitions from carpet to desks, and then several students are talking to one another. That poor classroom management, sloppy transitions, several students. All right. So I think you're getting the hang of what we're looking for. Okay. We need to provide specific facts of what we hear and what we see in the classroom. So when a teacher looks at this, you know, there's no opinions in there. And I think that's what gets us in trouble sometimes in observations is we put our opinions and we infer versus putting exactly what is said and what is seen. And when we do that, you know, that's the fact, and facts don't lie. So that's what we need to capture. All right, we got one more here. The teachers seem to be okay with this, and a few students go to the round table. Some start reading and some don't. Some seem to be okay. Few students. All right. All right, so we found lots of words in here that were ambiguous and that were not as clear as they needed to be. All right, now I'm going to shift over to the next slide, and I want us to look at what would this evidence look like for that same evaluation if we didn't have all of these words, problematic words, this ambiguity in there. So I'm going to give you just a second to take a look. I'm not going to read them to you, but read through these comments. All right, so now here's my question. What do you notice about the difference? What do you notice? Yeah, very specific. Yes, specific and factual. It's evidence, it's not an opinion. Yes, it's what was observable in that classroom. All right, so now let me ask you this question. What difference do you think it would have made if you were this teacher and if you had received the first set of evaluation data versus this set of evaluation data? how do you think that would, what would that difference have been for the teacher? If somebody wants to unmute and speak to that, how do you think that would have impacted the teacher?
The first set of data came off as pretty abrasive. And I think if I have received that as a teacher, I don't know that I would have been very receptive to it. I probably would have taken offense, possibly, depending on the personality type of the teacher, may have shut down instead of being receptive to some constructive criticism.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think with that first set of statements and evaluation data, it's more like it leads us to that we're doing this to the teacher. All right. And I think you're exactly right. We can get to the same coaching and the same constructive criticism through evaluations written this way. All right. Because even though this does not seem as abrasive, you're still going to process this information and you're still going to come to some conclusions, and you're going to make some inferences based on this that you're going to talk with that teacher about. But I totally agree. It is going to, I think, help a teacher to really truly get a picture of what happened while you were in that classroom, but be more open to having a conversation about, what are some areas that may need some improvement and how can we go about that? So definitely, I think so. All right, so we are going to do just a little more practice here. All right, so the first thing I want you to do is I want you to access this Google form. All right, and this is anonymous, but I just want you to have a little time to practice. And so the quiz, there's 10 on there, and it's going to provide you rationale and feedback for you to review if needed. All right, and then after you finish that, we're actually going to go into breakout groups, and I'm going to give you a little time just to kind of talk about what we've been through so far and process your learning. So go ahead and take a couple of minutes to finish the Google form. All right, I think most of you, I'm trying to watch those of you that are on, that I can see. It looks like most of you probably have had an opportunity to uh, go through that Google form. So we're going to go into breakout rooms, and we're going to use breakout rooms throughout the day, all right, for different times, just to give you an opportunity, number one, to kind of process, like I said, process what we're talking about. And then also just to meet some people that you might not talk with every day and make some new connections. So John's going to create some breakout rooms. When you see it pop up, we're just going to stay in there for about three minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, just to let you talk about what your thoughts are about evidence versus opinion and what kind of an impact that can make on the evaluation cycle within your schools and within your districts. All right, so when you see that pop up, you can just join your breakout room. Just do my time.
Are you able to?
I can see them.
Who's joining?
Mm-hmm.
Are you muted?
right, I think everybody's popping back in now. All right, so before we transition on to our next section, what were some comments? What were some things you talked about in your breakout rooms? Anybody would like to share?
Kelly, we just kind of shared in our small group that it takes skill to be able to capture all the evidence in the amount of time that it's going on, because there's so many things happening all at one time to focus in on that number or gather that specific evidence. I think sometimes that may be why we jump to opinion, because that's what we can capture so quickly. So I think we have to be intentional of practicing on how to gather the evidence that we need at that moment in time.
Yeah, and Donna, I totally agree with that. And the one comment that I'm going to make about that is, you know, when we go into a classroom to observe, there really is too many things to try to capture while we're in there. So I always suggest, why not have a focus during that observation? Okay, so if a teacher, you know, look at their professional growth plan. What is it that they're, you know, that they want to have growth in? And then when you go in for that observation, have a focus around a certain area. So instead of trying to capture everything that's taking place, have a focus. All right. You know, if they're trying to work on their classroom management skills, then go in with that focus and capture everything around their classroom management, because that's what's going to help them improve. All right. So I totally agree. I always struggled going into a classroom trying to think I had to capture everything. There's no way to do that effectively. And yes, we have to be intentional. So for me, I think it's almost leads to having that focus. You don't have to do that, but I have found that works really well. You know, base it on their professional growth plan. What is it? Maybe there's a school-wide focus. Maybe everyone in the school is working on a certain area. Then maybe that's what you try to capture the most. Not that you won't capture other things while you're in there, but that you just kind of have that focus where you're intentional about making sure that you're capturing those facts. Does anyone already do that? Like with your observations, do you have like, you know, focus areas, or do you just go in just trying to capture everything for the amount of time that you're in there for the lesson?
I don't really do a focus area, because we've got so many things that we have to evaluate with domains 2 and 3 in our evaluation plan. So that may be something that I would do more on a walkthrough situation where I'm not doing anything of an official observation, but it just seems like on that we have to go ahead and put some things for, you know, all of the indicators in 2 and in 3.
Yeah, and I do agree, Tanya. I know exactly where you're coming from. So Um, yeah, so Ellen, great comment there. I think, 3B, questioning and discussion, is where we're going to go next. And that is an area to where, you can focus in. And, I do understand that if you're doing an evaluation, that you have to capture evidence in all of those domains. But I always just say, let's try to strategically think about how we can do that, even spacing it throughout the year, using walkthrough data. Maybe the first time you're in the classroom, you're looking, you're focused on one area, and maybe the next time you're focused on another area. That doesn't always work, but, just giving you some other options just to try to think about in making this, and it's so hard. The evaluations, I think, are difficult because I think for all of you, you truly want to make this a collaborative effort, and you want to make this meaningful for the teachers, and you want to improve their practice. So we have to be careful that, it's not just compliance, that we're not just trying to check the boxes off because that's what we have to do. It's trying to figure out that happy medium in there to how can we hit everything that we need to, but how can we hone in on, a particular area, one or two items or things to really help a teacher grow, throughout the year, because it's just so difficult. But yes, so thank you all. Thank you all for sharing. All right, so I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. All right. All right. And it's not moving, so just a moment. All right, not sure why it froze up. I apologize. I'll try to do better. You know how these virtual trainings go. Nothing is ever perfect. So just bear with me. So our next section here, we're going to talk a little bit more of just a refresher. Okay, there's no way to go through everything in the framework for teaching and the principal framework and touch on everything. But I do think that there is such a huge focus on, questioning and discussion, and just the importance of that in student success, that we want to go through a little bit of a refresher on this. So, all right, I'm going to give you just a moment. If you will go back to that resource page, you have that open in a tab. All right. If you'll look there, you will see where you have a copy of 3B questioning and discussion techniques. You'll want to bring that up in a tab just so you have access to it, because we're going to be using that together in the whole group, but then also in some breakout groups. So you'll want to make sure that you have access to that. So let me give you just a second to access that. All right. you have any problems with that, just reach out and we'll try to help you make sure that you have access to everything. So we're really going to look at 3B, like I said. On the left side, you know, it's the quality of questions, it's the discussion techniques, and student participation. All right. So everyone on this is familiar with this and has read it, I'm sure, multiple times. You know, the one thing that I want to point out is, you know, the accomplished is where we would hope teachers land. All right. Now, if they make it to exemplary, then that's wonderful. But accomplished is kind of where we're, you know, hoping that we can get all of our teachers to, and then that we can move even several of them over to the exemplary. You know, and talking about, you know, evaluations and, you know, assigning ratings to teachers, I think it's important for us to always take a step back within our school, within our district, and actually look at those observations, those evaluations, and see where teachers are being rated. All right. And the reason I say that is because, you know, sometimes I've worked with some districts and maybe they have some test scores that are not where they want them to be. And so we are brainstorming and thinking about, okay, what can we do? What are some strategies in the classroom that we can strengthen to help in those areas and to help students perform better, you know, to support our teachers in this work. And sometimes things that we'll see is that teachers are receiving exemplary ratings, but maybe their test scores don't correlate with that. And so I think it's important, you know, that we do think about how we're rating teachers and how that does correlate to how students are performing in the classroom all throughout the year. Sometimes we see some discrepancy there. So I think it's important for us to always make sure that, you know, we're trying to be as authentic in this process as possible, but also as honest in this process as well. All right. And I'm going to use myself, for example. All right. When I was in the classroom, I thought if I did not get the best score on everything, you know, I'm a perfectionist, that I felt like, well, goodness, what's wrong with me? I mean, you know, I really had that mentality. And I think it's just, but over time, evaluations, I think, have evolved. And we now know that in all reality, we never stop learning, and we can always improve. And so I think it's important for us to, you know, express that mindset to our teachers as well, is, you know, we're not all going to be exemplary every time in every area. That's just not going to be reality, because if you have teachers that are, they're not going to be right there in that classroom. They're going to be doing something else. So I think it's just important for us to have those discussions and look at those data points in our district around where are our teachers being rated, and then how does that relate to how students are actually performing on a day-to-day basis. So you should have this up in a tab. All right. And then we're also going to take a look at an additional document. All right. And on this document, you'll see the link there. If you'll go ahead and copy that link and open that up, you're going to need that document as well for the next breakout session. So you can open that up in a tab as well. And so I want you to be able to refer to both of these documents. So the actual 3B from the Framework for Teaching, and then also this document here, It's just going to give you some additional language that might be helpful in your discussion as well. All right, so those two items you should have open. Okay. Just making sure. So the main thing would be that someone in your group will have access to those as we move along. All right. And so we are going to go back into breakout rooms, and this time you're going to be, you'll probably be with different people. I just want you to have the opportunity to talk with a variety of participants today. But what we're going to do, okay, is we're going to take a look, all right, at 3B. And this is just a refresher, all right? So what's going to happen is I want you to pay attention to the room number that you're in, okay? So in a few minutes, when it pops up and it asks you to join a breakout room, there's going to be a number, all right? Is it breakout room 1, or is it 2, or is it 3? All right, so just pay attention to that, because what I want you to do is also, I want one person to access this document that's on the screen now, because you're actually going to, whoops, you're actually going to type into this. And I think for this one, I'm probably going to need to put this link in the chat. John, do you have access to be able to do that on that on my PowerPoint? Let me stop sharing because I want to actually share. All right, so what's going to happen there is you're going to have access to this slide. All right, and I may have to stop sharing and go back and do that myself. And I apologize that I didn't already have that ready. I did share the PowerPoint with you as well. So give me just a second. I apologize. But while I'm doing that, you can be taking a look before we even go into breakout rooms at those two documents. Just kind of refresh on that while we get this link for you. All right, so I have just dropped that link. I apologize for that. So if you open up the link in the chat, one person in your group will actually type into that. All right, so how do you know where to type? Once again, when you go into your breakout room, all right, if you're breakout 1, then you're going to be group 1. You're going to be on that first slide, and you're going to type in, you know, your comments and your thoughts as you, oh yeah, I'm seeing people populate in there now. So we got that going. All right. So you're either going to be talking about and discussing quality of questions and prompts, or discussion techniques, or student participation. So one of those big rock items from 3B is what you're going to be, what your group is going to be talking about. So then when we get to group 4, it just starts over again, quality of questions and prompts. All right. So I'm going to stop right there just for a minute before we do breakout rooms and see if anybody has any questions on what we're doing. Okay. So we're going to look at 3B, and you and your group are going to talk about the topic, the big rock from 3B, and capture some talking points. And then when we come back together, we'll do some sharing out. So, all right. So we're going to put you back in groups of 3. So just watch for your breakout rooms to pop up. All right, you can just join your room. There she is. All right, let's see here. Okay, I'm going to put room 12 and room 7.
Four this time. That was a neutral.
All right, so now I think we've got a partner for everybody. Yay.
some technical difficulties. Okay, now I should be able to still type. I'll do it.
Hey, shh.
All right, so I think everybody's popping back in. All right, so we're back now. All right, so we're just gonna do kind of use this kind of like a jigsaw. We're just gonna do a little sharing out. So if someone from your group, all right, so if you had quality of questions and prompts, what were some things that you added on your slides that were what's valued and what it might look like or sound like in the classroom? So that can be from anyone. Okay, so that could be from group 1, group 4, anyone that talked about quality of questions and prompts. Just unmute and share with us.
Kelly?
Yes.
This is Edwina from Group 4.
Yes. Glad to see you today.
Good to be here. We had to spend some time getting organized on some of our forms and things, but we did look at, we did put in our box that we were looking for questions that gave the students an opportunity to explore and expand their thinking. And an example of that was what might happen in the next chapter of our book. And that gives them some idea to do some thinking on their own and use some of the details they already have to predict what might happen.
Yes, thank you for sharing. And yes, I did have you doing several things there, so you had to maneuver a lot. I know that was asking a lot, but I was watching comments populate in, so yes, yes. Anyone else want to add to what Edwina said? I'm not sure who all was in group 1, but just seeing things like genuine discussion, higher level causes, students to think and reflect. All right. I love that quality of questions being asked. That's so very important that we as teachers are not only asking lower level questions, but we really are stretching students to think in the questions that we are asking. You know, one thing that I always coach teachers to do is, you know, plan out 1 or 2 higher level questions that you can ask during a lesson. All right. Because most of the time we can't come up with those questions on our own. I mean, just off the top of our hat when we're right in the middle of a lesson. But if we always have some jotted down on a Post-it note in our plan book, wherever, just to make sure that we get those students to that higher level of thinking, that's always very important. And that's a great strategy for teachers to use. All All right, who might want to share what you talked about around discussion techniques? We are being a quiet group today. You know that bothers me when I'm on Zoom because I barely can see you. And then if you don't talk to me, then I'm like, I don't really know. I'm going to look at group 8 there. All right. That's what you see on my screen.
I'll share.
Some things that group 8 captured. If anybody from group 8 wants to share, feel free.
I'll share from group 8, Kelly.
Oh, thanks, Diane.
We just talked about, it seems like it values genuine discussion among students, getting most students involved in that discussion so that it isn't just 2 or 3 of them, and planning those higher order questions. It might look or sound like you would see students responding to each other, formulating questions on their own. They might be using some talking stems to stimulate and to continue that discussion, to keep it going in a particular way. You might see good wait time. There would be a system in place for ensuring that most students are responding and have the opportunity to respond.
Yes, perfect, perfect. And when we see those, all 4 of those in a classroom happening, you're going to have some good things. All right, you're going to have some good things going on, okay? Especially when you have students actually formulating those questions and asking those questions. That's really how a teacher moves into that exemplary category, is, you know, when it becomes more about the students doing the work, formulating the question, than it is just the teacher asking the questions and doing more of the work. Perfect. All right, and let's move to who might want to share about student participation. Anybody that had that?
Kelly, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
We discussed student participation, and some of the things that we noticed as being valued or maximum student engagement versus someone who dominates the conversation. And that's really what a good questioning and discussion session is. It is a conversation, not just, you know, kind of one-sided. So there's some equity there among the students, but there's also student ownership. It might sound like or look like Socratic questioning. It's going to be noisy, but in a good way. It's not going to be a quiet classroom. Body language of the students indicates that there's interest and engagement in that discussion. And typically where we want to get students is that the teacher is able to step away and the students lead that discussion after sufficient scaffolding. Another one of the things we talked about was sometimes we see the more mature classes, the older students, having a little bit better time with leading that discussion and taking over that role and that ownership. I've seen it a lot at the high school level where some of our freshman classes, it's not as easy to see this as it is in some of the more the classes with your juniors and seniors. So some of that comes with maturity, but as teachers and educators, you know, we've got to get them there.
I think you bring up a great point there, that it does look different in different grade levels. All right. So I'm going to say you can have real authentic, you know, discussions even in a kindergarten classroom or a first grade classroom, but those are going to look and sound different than as students become older. So when they get to the high school level, those are going to sound much different, but you really truly can have those authentic discussions and students participating even in the lower levels. It just looks different. So yes.
Okay, Julie,
all right. Yeah. Anybody else want to share anything there?
Right? So you saying you don't have any problems with it, but obviously you do.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and
thinking? If you
take a break.
slow down. I know you didn't see you did.
So,
What's everybody else thinking if they know your history?
sorry about that. John's going to take
way
care of
back when.
it. I know everybody's got lots of other things that sometimes enter onto our plates as we're on these virtual. So no worries there. We're going to take a little break. All right. So let's just, let's come back at 10:10. All right. So just get up, stretch, move around, get you something to drink, get a snack, and we'll just join back here at 10:10. All right. Thanks so much. All right, welcome back. Hope everybody got up and stretched and moved around a little bit, and now you're ready to dig back in. That's what I'm expecting. So first off, I do want to say thank you for just staying engaged this morning and you know, working through this process, sharing your comments, and you know, just being engaged in those breakout rooms and talking and learning from one another. So, all right, so the next part that we're going to focus in on is just some observation calibration. And so we're actually, through the rest of the day, we're going to watch 3 different videos. So we'll have a middle school, we'll have a high school, and then we'll have an elementary that we're going to be viewing either all of the video or part of the lesson and capturing evidence while we're watching. And then we're going to do some calibration work together. So I'm not moving. All right, I'm froze again. Not sure why, but that's okay. We'll just go back and try again. These are the kind of things that don't make me happy about being virtual, but I know that you all understand. We're all in this boat together. So, all right, so this first one is going to be a 7th grade social studies example. It is a video from Teaching the Core. We're not going to watch all of this by any means, all right? But just wanted you to see some of the questions that the students are thinking about. You know, what makes Nevada unique from other states? What factors have caused Nevada to become a state built on sin? You're going to hear this conversation of the students, and should Nevada continue to base its revenue on sin? So you can kind of think about what they're talking about. All right, so they're going to be, and I also want you to have an opportunity to look at some of the things that they've already been reading. All right, so this is a student-led Socratic seminar. I heard that in some of the comments earlier, that's a good technique. That's a great strategy to use in classrooms. All right, but what has happened is students are going to be referencing some readings, some prior readings that they have already completed. And so what I'm going to ask you to do as we watch is find you something to write on, and I want you to capture some evidence. All right, just pretend that you're in this classroom, and I want you to just capture some evidence. But just know that for this purpose, we're going to be focusing on 3B. All right, so keep in mind what we just talked about before we went to break. So we're focused in on the quality of questions asked. All right, what kind of questions did the teacher ask? What kind of questions did the students ask? What kind of discussion techniques are used? What kind of evidence can you record around that? And then also student participation. So those are some areas that you want to focus in on as you capture some evidence here. Also want to remind you from back earlier, let's make sure, okay, let's make sure that we stay away from those keywords and phrases that we need to avoid, and make sure that we're very specific in what we write down. All right, we want to be specific. Write down, if you hear a question, write down exactly what you hear. All right, those kind of things help keep you grounded in what you're looking for. Okay, all right, so back to the video. And it'll take me just a moment because we're not going to watch the entire video. So let me start it. All right. So here we go. Turn my volume up. We're going to start it over here about. We could watch the whole thing, but it's really too long for us to do in this virtual setting. So we're just going to watch a portion of it. So let's start right here.
I'm a little confused about on line 94. It says attracting an international icon to Reno puts us on the map, such as Apple. Well, how come gambling put us on the map? And then how did we get back off the map if we were already put on? Well, there were several other states that started having gambling and quick divorces. So we were no longer this unique state that had all these things that you couldn't do in other states. And that's sort of how we got off the map, as you put it, because we weren't the only ones doing it. There's other people doing it too, so we weren't special.
Okay, I'm going to stop it because I thought I saw some odd faces there. And then John says, I'm not seeing. So let me try this again. There's something about this.
So stop your share one more time. And this time you share it. Instead of sharing the PowerPoint, I think that's what. Yeah, now go to share screen. And then just do the screen. You've already got it optimized, so that should be.
Okay.
Let's see if that.
Just give me just a second. I think I have the link up. So let me. All right, let me. All right, here's what I want to share. All right, so let's try this. I'm not going to maximize the screen. I don't know if that has something to do with it, but we're going to try to start it from here. So all right, let's try this again.
Well, there were several other states that started having gambling and quick divorces. So we were no longer this unique state that had all these things that you couldn't do in other states. And that's sort of how we got off the map, as you put it, because we weren't the only ones doing it. There was other people doing it too, so we weren't special. I would like to agree with Vanessa because in document A, it says on lines 48 and 49 that there are riverboat gambling and that have competed with Nevada's casinos. So we're not the only state that is doing this now. So we need to change the way we're making money because other states are doing the same thing, so we're not profiting very much from it.
Do you have anything to add on to that, James?
Well, I would just like to add on because it's on document A, lines 48 and 49. It says Midwest riverboat gambling and public casinos by that time had competed with Nevada's casinos.
Nathan, do you have anything to add on to this?
Yeah, on document C on lines 40, so that most of Nevada's income comes from gambling. So I think we should go bigger with the gambling and take it away.
What about you, Brianna? Anything to add?
I think we should do some taxes because we get the money to have more
I'd like to go back to what Taylor said, because in lines, document C, lines 2 through 3, it basically, it says that as states budget strained under a huge debt load, they are counting increasingly on sin taxes, which if we get rid of all this sin tax stuff, then we wouldn't have any really way to make it.
I'd like to disagree on what Connor said because on line 63 to 64 in document A, it says Nevada must recognize that relying only on a tourism-based economy will no longer ensure a successful future. So if we just stay with gambling, then what if it ends and we won't have any more people to come to our city or our state? So that's why we need other activities besides gambling.
I'd like to disagree with Lauren because on document C, line 34, it states that gambling is the most profitable sin in Nevada and it's brought the most income in. So even if we bring in more things, gambling is still our most profitable sin, and if we get rid of it, we won't have money.
I would like to disagree with what Taylor said because in document C from lines 25 through 34, out of the 3 states that use gambling as their most profitable sin, we are the lowest of making money. So if we're the lowest making money, that kind of proves that either we don't charge enough on taxes, and if we do, that might not bring as much people in because they don't want to pay so much. But if other states are, that's bringing in more people, so there's kind of 2 ways for us to go.
Nate, do you have anything to say to this?
No.
I'd like to agree with what Michael said because we do have a lower tax rate, but if you look at on document C, that we make a lot more money than some states do, because we have more people coming in because it's not that high of a tax rate, and
I would like to also agree with Michael because on document D in line 18 and 19, another way we could make money other than sin is that Lake Tahoe is ranked one of the #1 places during the winter, and also in line 29 and 30 in document D. Lake Tahoe has also picked up several additional noteworthy warm weather awards. So not only can we profit from winter, we can also profit from summer. So like we have a year-round season that we can profit from this.
Agreeing with Jordan on document B
in lines 94, it says attracting an international icon. Selena puts us on the map, saying like Apple brought us back on the map instead of putting sin. It still gives us money.
Maddie, do you have anything to add?
I do not have anything to add because I agree with both of the sides to keep gambling but still have more city attractions, because on document D on lines so we could have all sorts of other things besides gambling, because we're the best beaches for families. We're the number 5 for best winter vacations for so I don't see why we just can't have both.
I agree with Maddie because on document A in line 7 and 8, the old way of doing business won't cut it for the rest of the 21st century. But if gambling will never disappear from Reno, but we also have all of the pros in Nevada that on document D. Why can't we have both gambling that makes us money, but then we also have the attractions in our city that also bring people in.
I agree with Krista, and I think that we should tax gambling more like Pennsylvania does, because it would bring in more money, and I think we should stick with all the things that we've done good, like outdoor things in Nevada, so I think we should stick with both.
Adding on to what Taylor said, if income is the issue here, and that's why some people agree that we should still base our revenue on sin, then what we can do, any of you think that we should tax outdoor activities such as Lake Tahoe and bowling stadium and such?
Meta, do you have anything to add onto what Vanessa said?
I agree with Vanessa because on document A, it basically states that gambling makes a lot of money for us, and on document D, it also states all the good things that we have besides gambling. So I think we should have both.
Daniel, do you have anything to say to this?
No.
Corbin, do you have anything to add on?
I want to go back to Maddie's statement about how without the gambling, we still have all the events and the achievements. Because if we look past the gambling and tourism, we would still have, like, on document D, 6 through 12, we have all those achievements in our state. We have all the events that happen, and then we have 18 through 28, where we have all the destinations like ski resorts, how we had the top-ranked Squaw Valley, and all those events there. So we basically still have events that could help us a little bit too.
I think that when you have like gambling so if you have gambling and if that is what will put us on the map, people will want to come if they know that gambling is still here, because people think of it as like a bad city. So if we just got rid of gambling and just focused on this stuff, and they'd be like, oh, it's a nice town with vacation spots and ski resorts based on document D. So like you don't. So I think that you shouldn't have that, because it doesn't really like when you think about it, when you think about Nevada, you would think of right now. You would think about Las Vegas, or Las Vegas. We're not. We've never been in Nevada.
I'd like to not agree with Johnny and Gordon on how.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop it there, okay? Because I think that gives us a good idea of what the entire class period looked like. So let me go back. All right, so take a look there at some of the things that you captured as you were watching. Look at your evidence. Look and see if you see any of those ambiguous words or any of those things that you should avoid. If you do, just kind of circle them. All right. This is only for you to look at, but you know, if you have anything like that, go ahead and you know, circle it, look at it. All right. And then I'm going to bring up all right. So here, when that pops up, here's going to be some evidence that was collected. All right. And I want you to take a look at what you collected and see if you're seeing any of the same things. So you're going to, everybody's going to capture different things. And it's hard to get like entire sentences written down sometimes or entire statements. And that's okay. All right. If you capture the beginning of it that gets you started, then that is really enough evidence to be able to document that you saw, you know, student participation or discussion, or even the questions that students asked. So when you look at this and you look at what you captured, what's something that you notice right off?
The fact that the students, when they responded, they agreed or disagreed with other people. So that shows that they're listening. That's evidence as they're listening.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Great point. And that's something that has had to be taught over time for students to you know, have those types of conversations within a class, to agree, to disagree, and then to back it up by evidence as well.
Kelly, the teacher didn't say much of anything. Occasionally she would just prompt, do you have anything to add? But they did all the talking.
They did. All right. They did almost all of the talking. I mean, the teacher really was just an observer in the classroom. You know, she probably did work to get a few additional students involved if they didn't say anything. Did you notice that students even did that as well? You know, they would call out other students that had not replied or had not shared anything to see if they wanted to add. You know, so a lot of evidence around discussion and student participation, and a lot of questions that were asked by the students. All right. So when we look at all of our evidence, all right, and we go back to 3B, all right. So on this one, I'm not going to ask you to do this. I'm just going to kind of share with you. But when I look at that evidence and I watched, all right, the things that I highlighted in domain 3 under questioning and discussion techniques, you can see there fell under the exemplary category. Okay, a variety or series of questions or prompts to challenge students cognitively, students formulating those questions, those students ensuring that all voices were heard. All right, so those are things that the evidence backed up. And then when you move to the critical attributes, you know, I had things, you know, highlighted in the accomplished area and also in the exemplary, and then the possible examples you can see there as well. So that's exactly what we need to do when we have evidence. We need to take it back and we need to look directly at the framework for teaching, all right, and see where that falls. All right. And I'm big on the highlighting because I think that's easy for a teacher to see. You know, they can look at what the evidence was, and then they can see, okay, where did that fall on the framework for teaching? And then you can have some conversations around that. Okay. Because really, truly, we might have some different opinions. But as long as we are in the ballpark, that's what makes the most difference. All right. So now that you look at that, you look at the framework for teaching and you've highlighted the areas that your evidence pointed towards, then you really have to look at this preponderance of the evidence. And that's how you decide upon the rating for the teacher. All right. So based on the preponderance of the evidence, where do you think this teacher would be rated? Anybody want to go out on a limb and say what they think? All right. Yes, Tom, thank you. So, yes, based on the preponderance of the evidence, all right, this teacher would be rated as exemplary in 3B. All right. So even though there were some areas that were in the accomplished, there was more evidence for the exemplary category. So that's the reason then they would be rated as exemplary for this. And why? What was the big takeaways from this observation for you as far as what was happening in the classroom?
Well, again, it was all student directed.
Yes, all student directed. And once again, that's how you get really over into that exemplary category, is when the students are really taking ownership of their own learning, and they're really taking, over mostly the class. So it moves in the accomplished, I think, from more teacher directed to exemplary, where it's student directed. All right. So our goal here really was to capture, have some practice to really capture some evidence that was relevant to 3B, align that evidence, and decide upon the performance level. All right. So I'm going to give you 3 questions here just to think about for a moment. Where did you hit or miss the objective? All right. What caused your results? And then what should you start, stop, or continue doing? So just think about the evidence that you captured, that you wrote down. All right. Where did it fall? We're thinking about calibrating here. So we really have to think about, what did I capture? And was it close to what was captured by someone else? Did I come to the same conclusion that my evidence pointed toward an exemplary rating? And then what are some things that you should start, stop, or continue doing? All right, so those are just some reflection questions. No one has to share out on those, but just some reflection questions to think about, because before we break for lunch, we're going to do one more calibration exercise. And on this one, we're actually going to watch the video. You're going to capture your evidence, but this time we're actually going to go into breakout rooms and have some discussion around the evidence that you captured during the observation. All right. So the first one, we didn't do that, but the next one, just going to give you a little warning that we are going to go into breakouts. So you'll want to make sure that you do have some things documented that you can talk about during the breakout session. Okay. So this time, We're going to be looking at a physics lesson. So this is going to be a high school example. We're hoping that we're going to be able to get our video going here. So we are going to watch. Oops. I love when you practice and everything just works perfectly. And then it doesn't work when you try it. So give me just a second. I apologize. All right, we're going to try this one more time.
All right, let's come back together. Before we move on to the lesson for today, does anybody have a question about the review folder? Any questions now that you want to ask? Any questions? Go ahead.
I just want to make sure that for ours, we have to, it gives us an angle of theta and then the R magnitude.
Yes.
So we have to make a triangle on a plane. And our angle theta was 90 degrees, so I just wanted to make sure that, would that mean there was no x component?
What do you think?
Well, I know that for 45, when you have like an angle 45, you start from the x-axis and then move up 45. So when you start, when it gives you 90, would you just move up all the way and have no x component?
Let's see, here's a 45-degree angle. So you're going to have an x component and a y component because you're going to move to the right and then up to get to that point that has the 45-degree angle. Is that right?
Yeah.
But your question is, what if the angle is not 45? What if it's 90 degrees? Now what do you do? Now what do you do? Do you move to the right? So the question is, will there be any x component?
Yes.
What is the x component here?
0.
All right, it's important. That's a good question. In your group right now, I would like the C person in each group to kind of summarize what we just said. What did we just say?
So if there's a, you assume a 90 triangle at 90 degrees, it's going straight up, right? So there's no components in the y direction, I mean in the x direction. So yeah, there would be no components. The components in the x direction would be pretty much
All right, take a moment to make a note for yourself on the conclusion there. If there's a 90-degree angle, then there's no x component because you're not moving in the horizontal direction. That's important? That's important. Take a moment to make a note in your conclusion about that. Okay, as you wrap that up, I want to bring your attention to today's topic. Today's topic is temperature. Temperature. The first thing I want you to do in your group, the very first thing. Notice the first thing on your sheet is, what do I already know? We've already had an introductory lecture on this. In your group right now, I'd like you to spend just 30 seconds to a minute discussing what you already know about temperature. So in 30 seconds or a minute, I'm going to ask you to share What do you know about temperature? So spend that time right now. What do you know about temperature?
No, it's the total Fahrenheit is equal to 950.
Total Celsius.
Total
Temperature
Celsius.
Plus
Plus
32.
32.
And that.
And then, no,
Celsius.
Okay,
So,
let's come back together. In your group over there, Christian, who's the B person? Go ahead.
Well, we concluded that temperature is just a measurement of the amount of heat in an object, and heat is basically just the amount of energy that it has.
Any response to that?
It's the amount of kinetic energy the molecules have.
Tell me more.
That the molecules are made up of atoms, and the atoms move inside the molecules, and that is what temperature is.
Tell me more.
That the more movement of the molecules, the higher the temperature, and the lower the movement, the lower the temperature.
The lower the movement, the lower the temperature?
And
the slower the atoms move.
The atoms will never stop moving. It'll just it'll decrease, but it can never stop moving.
What will decrease?
The the kinetic movement in the atoms.
The kinetic movement of the atoms? All right. I like this idea. Here's what I'd like you to do right now. Write down, just briefly, 1 or 2 sentences what you already know. What you already know or what you think you already know. Just write it down briefly. Doesn't have to be long. Maybe 1 or 2 sentences. 1 or 2 sentences. You can if you want. Equations are fine. All right. As you wrap it up in the next 10 to 20 seconds, finish writing what you're writing. Now here's what I'd like you to do. This part of the lesson is going to be observation. That means I want you to look at the demonstration. You can get out of your seats. At this time, I don't want you writing. I'm going to give you plenty of time to write about it, but first I want you to see it. I want you to come up here in a position where you can see the demonstration, so you can get out of your seat if you need to. And I have 2 beakers. I have 1 beaker right here with a thermometer in it that reads 80 degrees Celsius. And I have another beaker right here with a thermometer in it that reads 21 degrees Celsius. So just to be clear, I have one that reads 80 degrees C and one that reads 21 degrees C. So I'll call this T sub H, and I'll call this T sub C. Of course, T sub H stands for the hot, and T sub C stands for the cold. Both of these are water, and I would like you to observe what happens. I have some red dye. I'm going to drop it in there, and I want you to observe what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to stir it. So just watch for a moment. As you're watching it, you can turn to the people in your group and just make observations. You can say anything you want. Just watch what happens.
So it's way faster. Hold on. Some sort of that one Oh, you know what? I get it. Because the atoms are moving so much, it's kind of stirring itself. It's like when you move so much, it's not stirring itself, but the atoms they're moving so much that it spreads it faster. Okay. Than this one.
All right. All right. What do you notice happening here? What do you notice happening here? Go ahead.
The dye dispersed faster in the hotter water than it did in the cooler.
Okay. So what?
So that's just the difference. The difference is that the hotter the molecules get, the faster that they move around in the beaker. So if you put
which molecules?
The water molecules.
Can you see any molecules in there?
Well, no, but you understand that because when you put the dye in, it shows how they're moving around the beaker.
What's he talking about, Melanie?
He's talking about that when you put another substance in another liquid substance in a water, the atoms are moving faster. So in this case, when it's hotter, that they're going to diffuse faster because the atoms are moving faster than the atoms that are in the cold.
Can you see any atoms in there?
No.
Then why are you so sure that atoms are going on?
Because of atomic theory.
Tell me more.
Atomic theory says that everything's made up of matter and atoms in it.
Okay, I want to be kind of clear. That's correct. Here we're actually talking about molecules. Which molecules in particular? Water, hydrogen and oxygen atoms that come together to make water molecules. And we can't see those. We can't see them at all. If I look in there, it looks like liquid to me. If I try to see particles, I simply can't see them. But the dye helps us to infer something. And it's helping provide evidence for the model, the atomic model that you're talking about. And I would like you to take a moment right now to sit down in your groups and discuss what kind of evidence did this observation give you about the atomic model or the molecular model and temperature. So sit down for a moment and give that a discussion.
All right, so we're going to stop the video right there. All right, and so you had an opportunity to capture some evidence, all right, around 3B, around the student participation, discussion, techniques, what kind of questions are being asked. So we're gonna go into some breakout rooms. What I want you to do is take your evidence. You've still got in that tab opened your 3B. If you need to if you want to refer back to that, which you probably will need to, and I want you to share some of the evidence that you captured with the others in your breakout room, and then have some discussion about where does it fall, all right? What rating do you think you would give this teacher? So I'm going to give you a little bit of time in your breakout room. We'll probably spend about 5 minutes, all right? We'll just leave you in there about 5 minutes. I want you to share out some evidence, talk about 3B, talk about the framework, where does your evidence fall? And then when we come back out, we'll actually do a quick poll question to see where you would rate this teacher before we actually talk about it. And then we are getting close to lunch, okay? So we're gonna put you in some breakout rooms. So just join your room. Hope you're in there with some new people this time. I did.
That's what I'm saying. It says open.
All right, I think we're back. Hope you had some good discussion over that. So I'm going to stop my sharing there, and I'm going to launch a poll. All right, and I just want you to complete the poll here. Okay, I'm getting the error too. I cannot. Can you launch it?
I did. I don't know. It didn't give me an error, so I'm only, I don't know how to see it.
Okay, are you all seeing the poll question? No. Well, lovely.
Posted in the,
Okay, it's not a big deal. We'll just do it in the chat. Just do it in the chat if you don't mind to. Just put in there where your group talked about where this teacher would fall. Ineffective, developing, accomplished, or exemplary. So just put it in the chat. No big deal. All right, so seeing lots of accomplished. Sorry, they were popping in so fast, I missed part of them. So mostly what I'm seeing is accomplished. Okay, love the comment that says more teacher-led, because really, truly, that is the reason, okay, for that. So yes, definitely accomplished. All right, I'm going to share my screen again here. And I'm just going to know that it's going to work. Going to get to the right place, and it's just going to do just what I want it to do. All right. All right, so it is accomplished. And here is just when I went through, all right, some things that I had marked as far as under the accomplished and the exemplary categories. And one thing that you always want to make sure of is when you highlight or when you mark something, that you have evidence, all right, captured that's going to back that up. Okay, always you need to have that evidence to support what you're saying. If you don't, then it's going to be hard to have a discussion with a teacher if they question something. So you need to make sure that you do have evidence. All right, so here is some of the evidence. All right, I heard the teacher say, what do you think? Do you have evidence for that? What kind of evidence did this observation give you? All right, is that the same thing Karina said? Give yourself a couple of minutes to draw diagrams about what happened. Take some notes. Student answered question orally and the teacher says, tell me more. Student A answered orally and the teacher said, any response to that? Student B then says. So you want to make sure that you have evidence to back up what you are at as far as whether they are going to fall in accomplished or exemplary. All right. When we move to the critical attributes, same thing. All right. Always make sure that you have evidence. So you're going to see that popping in there on the screen. I'm not going to read it all to you, but just evidence that came from the observation. All right. To support that accomplished rating. All right. So once again, we always need to look at that preponderance of the evidence to assign that rating, and that rating for this one would be accomplished. So great job on that today. All right. As we've been trying to do some calibration just to make sure that we're all on track with capturing evidence. And then how does that look as far as the framework for teaching? All right. So I think everybody's ready for a break. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about lunch. I mentioned this earlier. So to get us out early, you are going to have some asynchronous work to do over lunch. These links are on your resource page from earlier. All right. So if you open up your resource page, then you'll be able to access a 3-minute video that's a sample reflection conference. All right. As you're watching that one, I just want you to think about that question. What did you notice about the post-observation conference? Just what are some things that you noticed? And then there's a 15-minute TED Talk, Taming Your Advice Monster. So I also want you to watch that one and then think about what hunches do you have about your own advice monster in relation to feedback to certified personnel. So those are the 2 questions that we'll talk about when we come back after lunch. I've got 11:08. Why don't we just come back at 12:15? All right, at 12:15, that'll give you plenty of time to do this, move around a little bit, answer some emails, take care of some things, and we'll just meet back here at 12:15. All right, so if you need anything, just put it in the chat. I'll be around checking that as well. So have a nice lunch.
Kelly, this is Edwina. Did you get my first Google form this morning?
You know, I haven't checked that yet, but I'll tell you what I'll do at lunch here. I'll pull it up and check. And if I didn't have anyone on it, I'll put it back out there again for you. So,
well, I did it, but I did it on my phone because I needed to snap that QR code. I couldn't do it on my computer that way.
Yes.
So I snapped it on my phone and it went and it brought it up and I answered it all and submitted it and it gave me a score. So I thought you probably got the record, but I was just checking in case you needed that.
Yeah, I'll make sure, but I think you're good. Okay. I'll let you know. Thank you.
Teachers, pardon this interruption. Just a quick announcement. We're going to put a pause on map testing for 5th period only. So only today during 5th period will we not continue with map testing. Once we get the 6th period, we will restart that. Thank you.
Calibrating this afternoon, we're going to look more, while yes, we're going to look at capturing evidence from the observation, but we're going to lean more in towards that post-observation coaching, and we're going to do some role playing and some practice on that. And then we're also going to touch just a little on the principal evaluation before we finish up this afternoon. So just gives you a little bit of an idea of what we have left to talk about. All right. So we've had a middle school example, we've had a high school example, and now we're gonna go to the other extreme. We're gonna have a kindergarten example. And so, you know, many times I will have, you know, administrators struggle a little bit if they have an elementary background, but they're going into a high school, maybe to observe in a classroom. And I always have that conversation with them that, you know, good teaching is good teaching, irregardless of what grade level it is. And I think as long as we focus on, you know, capturing the evidence, what we see and what we hear, then we're going to be able to have the right kind of conversations with teachers, irregardless. So, all right, kindergarten. All right, so what I want you to make sure on this one is first, I do want you to take a look at the lesson plan for just a moment. All right, so Mr. Torney is the teacher, and you'll see there on the left side of your screen that his professional growth plan is focused on several areas. All right, but for this observation, he really wants to focus on 3B, questioning and discussion techniques. All right, so I'm going to give you just a second just to kind of look over the lesson plan, just so you can have a little bit of an understanding of where he's going with the lesson before we take a look at it. All right. So once again, I do want you to capture some evidence. What do you see? What do you hear? Document some of that as we watch some of this video. We're not watching all of it, so no worries there. And also, just one more time, because I think I saw some other people hop on, jump back with us. Please check the chat. I sent some direct messages to those of you that did not complete the Google sign-in at the beginning this morning. So if you'll check that and make sure if you have a message from me that you go in there and complete that, that would be great. All right, so let's get started.
So mathematicians, last time we had math workshop, you were working on decomposing the number 10. Can you give me a me too if you remember that? You found so many different ways to decompose the number 10. You found so many different ways to decompose the number 10. Like it was crazy. We learned that you could decompose 10 in so many different ways, right? Give me a me too if you remember that. So I want you to go ahead and take a look at Maria's way that she found.
Well, here we go again. I didn't know that it wasn't playing, so let me do it a different way. Man, I'm telling you. All right, let's try again. Share my screen.
So mathematicians, last time we had math workshop, you were working on decomposing the number 10. Can you give me a me too if you remember that? You found so many different ways to decompose the number 10. You found so many different ways to decompose the number 10. Like it was crazy. We learned that you could decompose 10 in so many different ways, right? Give me a me too if you remember that. So I want you to go ahead and take a look at Maria's way that she found to decompose 10 up here. And I just want you to take a minute and think to yourself and remember, what does that 1 mean? What does that 9 mean? And what does that 10 mean? So just take a few seconds and think about that. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to turn and tell your partner what you see and to describe the way that Maria decomposed 10. So it might sound like Maria decomposed 10 by or I see a group of or maybe you'll say something different. Please turn to somebody close to you on the carpet and tell them what you see. Brandon, turn to your partner. Ask him, do you agree or disagree? Because, Sabrina, what do you see? Stand on up, please, and come and show us. Enrique, what did Sabrina say that she saw?
She saw down there. And she saw one up there.
You can ask her, is that what you said?
Is that what you said? Yes.
Yes. Let's find another friend who can say more, who can add on. Will you find a friend with a quiet hand at their heart who can say more? Thank you.
One means is the one that is up here, and the 9 all of these hearts.
Okay. Say it one more time, please. I want to make sure I really understand your important mathematical idea.
This one means this heart that is up there, and this number 9 means that those hearts that are down, and the number 10 means that there in all are 10.
That in all there are 10. So I want us to remember this important math idea that we just talked about. There's a group of 1 and a group of 9, and together, as Abigail said, Eveline, in total or in all, there was a group of 10. I want you to remember that. That's going to be really important. I want you to take a look up here at the card that I just put up. And I'm going to ask you an important question. Are you ready to hear the important math question?
Yeah.
How many more hearts do I need to make 10? I'm going to say it again. Keep it in your mouth. Some people already have ideas. Take a look up here. How many more hearts do I need to make 10? Some people are showing me that they're done thinking. I'm going to give you a few more seconds just to have those important math ideas. Derek, come on up, please. Can you tell me what you're thinking?
I'm thinking that you need like 1 heart, 2 heart, 3 heart, 4. You need 4 to make each on that side, and then you need 1 like in the middle space, and then you need 4 again on the other side. And you need to write your name.
I do need to write my name. You're right. So can you repeat your idea one more time, please?
You need 4 on the other side, and 1 heart in the middle, and 4 on the other side.
Okay. So I'm hearing Derek say that I need 4 hearts and 1 heart and 4 hearts. Is that what you're saying, Derek?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, let's go ahead and see if that would make 10 together. Ready? So I'm going to build it the way you said. 4 hearts and 1 heart and 4.
Are you ready?
Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Okay, can you please go back to your spot? I'm going to ask you a question in 1 second. We're going to count these and make sure and see if we've made 10. You ready to help Mr. Torney count?
Yeah.
Israel, are you ready to help Mr. Torney count? Let's do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10, 1, 10, 2, 10, 3, 10, 4, 10, 5, 10, 6, 10, 7, 10, 8. Derek, do I have 10 on my paper?
Yep.
I do?
Yep, you got 10, 8.
I have 10, 8. Is that the same as the number 10?
No.
No? How do you know?
Because 10 is 1 and a 0, and 10, 8 is 1 and 8.
Are they the same number?
No.
No. Which is more?
10, 8.
10, 8. Okay, so wait a second. So I'm not sure that we built 10 on the paper yet. Will you call on a friend with a quiet hand at their heart who can add to your idea? So first off, do you agree with Derek or do you disagree with Derek?
I disagree with Derek.
Pause. Derek, is that okay? Is it okay that Danielle has a different idea?
Yep.
Yep, totally okay.
And we just learned this thing in Maria's because 1 plus 10.
Point, please, and show us what you're talking about.
1 plus 9 is 10, so...
Wait, pause you right there. What did we learn from Maria's paper? Danielle is telling us that he learned...
We learned that the 9 and the 1 are 10.
9 plus 1 makes 10. Okay, what's the next idea? So what does that tell us about what we're doing now? Derek, second reminder.
We're doing papers about
So what does that tell us here? How many more hearts do we need to make 10?
1.
Go ahead and draw it, and then we'll see if Daniela can add to that idea, or it looks like Steve
Where?
had something you really want to say. Draw that extra heart right there. Danielle, tell us again what you think you've done.
I think I've made 10
He thinks he's made 10, and why do you think you've made 10?
because I see it on Maria's.
can you please write the equation that describes what you just did? And then I'm really coming back to Daniela and Steve, I remember. So just write it at the bottom. Whoa, hold on, I just heard an idea. That's the same?
That's the same equation for Maria.
No way. Tell me more.
Because if Maria put 1 and then she circled the group of 9, it's 10.
Mm-hmm. So where's the group of 1 on the paper that Danielle just made, Steve? Can you come and show that to us, please? Okay, where's the group of 1 on the paper that Danielle just made?
Right here.
Okay, we circle that group of 1. So I'm hearing Steve say that there's a group of 1 right there. And where's the group of 9 on Maria's paper?
Right here.
And where's the group of 1 on Danielle's paper?
Right here.
Right there. Will you circle it?
Yeah.
All right, let's just do one giant circle around all of them so it's really clear that we got all of them like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Would you double check, will you count to make sure that 1 plus 9 is still 10? Can you count the hearts, please, that Danielle just did for us? All of them.
1, 2,
Oh, ask your
3.
friends, are you ready to help me count?
Are you ready to help me count?
Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10, 1? It's 10, 1 or is it 10? Can we double check one more time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ask your friends, are you ready to help me count?
Are you ready to help me count?
Yes. And then as we're counting this time, to make sure we're counting accurately, let's use the same counting path or groups that Derek saw. He said he saw a group of 4 and a group of 1 and a group of 4. So let's count the group of 4, the group of 1, the group of 4, and then we'll add on that one. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. What did we learn?
We learned it's 10.
That what is 10?
The hearts are all 10.
The hearts are all 10. And what's the number of the hearts? We learned that.
We learned that the number is 10.
How many hearts are here?
1.
So 1 heart plus
1 heart plus 9
hearts makes
10.
Makes 10 hearts. All right, Daniela, what are you hearing from your friends Steve and Danielle? Do you want to come on up and help us out with that?
Danielle said that Maria's is half 1 and 10.
1 and 10?
And 9.
1 and 9?
Mm,
I'm just, this is important. Is it 1 and 10 or 1 and 9?
9.
1 and?
1 and 9.
Okay, wait, so Danielle said that Maria's paper has 1 and 9. Would you show us those groups on the paper?
1 and 9.
Okay, so Maria's paper had 1 and 9. That was from when we decomposed it. Show us what Danielle was just saying. He was saying that on his paper.
He paper have 9 and 1.
Oh my gosh, it's similar, isn't it? We'll talk more about that during closure. We're going to talk more about that important idea during closure. That seems very, very important.
All right, I'm going to stop it right there. All right, so I'm hoping that you have collected some evidence. And once again, I'm going to have to stop sharing so I can go back to my PowerPoint. But I'm hoping that you do have some evidence collected there. All right, because we are going to talk with some others about what we saw in this class. All right, once again, you know I've been referencing this all day. Sorry, but one last time, make sure that we stay away from those keywords and phrases that we need to avoid. All right. Also, we want to refrain from talking about things that we would like to have seen or giving advice or comparing to other teachers, all of those things. All right. We want to focus on that relentless quality evidence. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to join some breakout groups. There's going to be more in your breakout group this time, because really, I just want you to come together, just have a little bit of discussion on what was some of the evidence that you collected around 3B. just have a little discussion around what you saw in that classroom, and then we're going to come back together. So we're only going to spend about 2 minutes in your breakout room, and then we're going to come back as a group, and we're going to kind of transition into talking about the post-observation conference. All right, so that's fine. So watch for your breakout rooms to jump up, and then just please join it. And then we'll be back in about 2 minutes. I'm just sitting here just talking away, so I apologize. So first of all, we're going to move into talking about the post-observation conference. I apologize for that. Post-observation conference. And this is a great protocol to use. You might tweak it. You might use it as is, but I think it is a good guide. The Southern Regional Educational Board and also Leverage Leadership, both of those endorse this sample coaching guide. And what I love about it as you look at it is you will notice the question stems to choose from. And also down the left side, you'll notice the time frames. And so this kind of helps keep you focused during the meeting and keep you on the right track. And so as you look down through there at the different steps, notice where you see the bulk of the conversation happening. All right. So notice that that comes in the middle, all right, around the action planning, practice, and that planning and support. So that's where the bulk of the conversation is going to happen. You have access to this on your resource page. So just want to make you aware of that. So you do have access to a copy of that. It's really great to use, and it's something that we're going to use this afternoon. So you may want to open that up and find that. So you'll have access to it in a few minutes. So it'll be on your resource page. All right. 6-step feedback guide. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to divide up into 2 groups. All right. So I want us to have some time to just kind of practice this. All right. Practice this conference. Think about planning some questions and some things that might be said to Mr. Torney. So what we're going to do is right now you'll see some discussion questions for the principal group. So we're going to have a group of you that are going to have the role of thinking as the principal. And then the others are going to have the role of thinking as a teacher. All right. So I'll come back to this slide in just a moment, but I'm going to go to the next one so you can look and see where you fall at. All right. So just look for your name and see if you are going to be a principal or the teacher. All right. So you'll just need to know that, because when we get ready to join our breakout rooms in just a moment, if you're a teacher, you're going to join room 1, breakout room 1. And if you're a principal, you're going to join room 2. Okay. So once again, teachers are going to be room 1, principals are going to be room 2. Okay. So everybody can find their name. Give you just a second, because I'm going to go back to that previous screen. All right. So what's going to happen is when you go in to the group principals, these are some things that I want you to think about and kind of talk about. All right. So if you're looking at that 6-step feedback guide and thinking about, okay, I'm going to have a conversation with the teacher about this observation. Think through that feedback guide and how would you establish rapport? All right. He wants to grow in 3B. So what was some evidence that you would want to focus on? So you all can kind of talk about as a group, what's some evidence that you all, wrote down from that observation that you might want to focus on in a conversation around helping him grow in the area of 3B. All right. And then also, I think it's always important to think about number 3, not so much for today, but some of it will be, but in what ways can you minimize defensiveness? All right. I noticed that someone said earlier in the chat that, sometimes it is a struggle, these conferences. All right. And it really just depends on the situation, but how can you minimize a teacher being defensive if you're having this in-person meeting? So always think about the physical space, the seating arrangement. It is always the best to not sit across from someone if at all possible. All right. Because when you're on one side and they're on the other side of the desk, that's like a barrier in between. So how can you think about the seating arrangement? All right. And then, think about the focus points. What does he want to grow in? And what can you pull out to really talk about to help him grow? And then think about your mannerisms as well. All right. Body language, facial expressions, those are extremely important when you're having conversations with others, any type of communication with others. Think about your mannerisms. All right. So those are just some points to think about. So principals, that's going to be your charge when you go to your group. Teachers, when you go to your group, you're just going to think like Mr. Torney right now, and you've watched the lesson, and you just need to think about, what are some things that you might have liked to have done better in that lesson, things you might want to improve on, things that you saw that went well in the lesson. So you want to think about those types of things, discuss those with the other teachers in your group. So then when we pair out in a few minutes and we practice some of these conversations, everybody will have a good idea of what they're going to talk about from the lesson. All right. So I'm going to stop just for a moment, see if anybody has any questions. All right. If no questions, there's going to be 2 breakout rooms. If you're a teacher, go to room 1. And if you're a principal, go to room 2. And we're going to spend probably about 5 minutes. All right. Just having some conversations around the feedback guide. All right. And what might be discussed in the post-observation conference. All right. So watch for your room to pop up. All right. Okay, so now you had some conversations in your role-alike groups, principal and teacher. And so the next thing that we're going to do is I want you to look at this slide. All right. And what you need to notice is what breakout room you'll be going to. All right. So what we're going to do now is principals are going to pair up with the teacher, and I want you all in your breakout room to have some conversations around this coaching post-observation session. So it's almost like a role playing, okay? So actually, you could just go through it that way. So the principal could begin with, you know, how are they going to develop rapport with you? What type of question are they going to ask? And just have some discussion, all right, what this might look like. What are some things that you would ask? How would you do some of those things? So everybody look and see what room number you're in. And what's going to happen this time is when the breakout rooms come up, you're going to see your name. When you hover over your name, it's going to highlight it. And there's going to be out to the right, it's going to say join. And when you click on that, then you'll have the choice to pick your room number. Okay. So watch for your name, and then you can choose. I need to stop muting myself, but I'm afraid I will bother you when I'm not muted if you're in a breakout room. So what I was saying is I went ahead and pulled us out of those breakout rooms a little quicker than I had planned, because I noticed several of you were in a breakout room by yourself. Some did not join in on that, which is totally okay, but I didn't want to leave anybody just hanging out there. So I hope for those of you that were in with someone else that you had some conversations around, you know, how you might use this feedback guide during post-observation coaching conferences, and hopefully you can find some use from that document. So thank you for that. And we're going to move on. I know that everyone is wearing down for the day. Virtual meetings are really difficult, so I do apologize for that. So we're just going to move. I want to talk for a little bit about principal evaluation, and then we'll be ready to get things wrapped up for the afternoon. So when we think about the roles that you all are in, okay, as administrators. So several of you are district certified personnel, several of you are principals. When you think about that, as far as the district certified personnel, you know, your performance criteria is determined by the district. All right, so that may look different for each of you. As far as principals go, your evaluations are based on the PCEL standards. All right, and so when you go back to your resource page, you're going to have numerous resources that you can access around the PCEL standards and principal evaluation that will help you out, I think, in your evaluation. And then I also want to note too, just to make sure that all principals are aware that there are other professional frameworks. So just making sure that you're aware of those for like library media specialist, school counselor, psychologist, those types of professionals. So just making sure that you understand that there are frameworks for those, as well as the teacher framework as you're doing those observations within your schools. All right. And so when you're thinking about, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this here, but I want everyone to realize that throughout our evaluations, we need to think about how we can tie that, all right, to our professional growth plans as well. All right. All of these things work together. So they're not all different pieces. They all intertwine. So when we're thinking about, I would say that you've already written your professional growth plan, or you're in the process of writing that right now for what areas you want to focus on for the year. And so that should be a part of the conversations that you have after evaluations. All right. So when you're observed and then you're having these conversations, the professional growth plan should come up in those conversations. All right. That's how we really support teachers in moving forward, and how principals are supported as well. All right. So here you can just see how the PSEL standards align to planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism. All right. So there are the standards for principals. All right, so I'm hoping that all of you principals, that everyone on here is familiar with the PSEL standards. I'm sure that you are. You know, you have the elements, and then each one has a progression of elements across the performance levels. So once again, it is a progression. All right, so no principal is probably going to be exemplary, an exemplary school leader in every standard, and that's okay. That's okay. What this shows us is the progression, and so what can we do to move across those performance levels toward exemplary? So this document really does a nice job in building, so you can see how to really get to that exemplary level as a school leader. Okay, so I'm gonna move past here. I do want to point out just a couple of things as we just pull out a few of the PSEL standards this afternoon. So we've got equity and cultural responsiveness. That one is a big one that's being focused on much at these times. And so just look at, once again, we're always focused on that accomplished performance level. All right. So just want to point out some of those words, all right, that kind of help us gain a better understanding of what that would look like. So words like ensures, recognizes, respects, okay, talking about equitable access to effective teachers. And then when we look at standard 4, which is curriculum, instruction, and assessment, and then standard 8, talking about families and communities. Here, I'm just gonna highlight some words and phrases that are good to keep in mind as you're thinking about you know, what evidence you can provide as a principal toward your evaluation as well. So how can you ensure that you are in the accomplished range, so you can, you know, take directly from the PSEL document to do that. All right. Okay. So now I want to talk to you. This is the same coaching document, but it is for principals. All right. So this is also linked in your resource page. All right. So you can see how this document can also be used during principal post-conference coaching sessions as well. All right. So you can look, access that on your resource, and hopefully that will be something that will support you as an administrator in your own professional growth. All right, so I'm gonna stop there for just a moment, see if anybody has any questions or any thoughts before we move forward. All right, so I know that everyone needs to get back to doing some things in your office. and in your district and in your schools. So let's go ahead and transition to the end of our day. All right. And as you know, I talked to you earlier about you were going to have some asynchronous and continuous learning opportunities, even as we end today, that you can choose to look at today, think about today, or in the future. So I want to share some walk-away questions for you to think about. All of you should be familiar with your district certified evaluation plan, but it is important, that you know enough from that CEP to know who immediate supervisors are for teachers and other professionals, that is determined. Everyone knows who will be evaluating them, how often tenured and non-tenured teachers and other professionals are observed. All right, how often are principals and assistant principals observed? The dates of those summative evaluation ratings being due to the district office. So there are a lot of important information that's in that you are in compliance, okay, within your district. So those are some takeaway questions for you to think about in making sure that you're aware of what your district certified evaluation plan says as far as evaluations within your district. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing there for a moment. All right, so a couple of things. If we pull up that resource paper from earlier, you'll notice, I will try to share that once again. Yes, and if we become, one of my computers was just knocked off, so I hope that I'm still on here with you. So I'm probably not going to be able to pull that up at the moment. But if you'll notice on your resource guide, you have some additional videos and resources that you can utilize after today. And also feel free to reach out at any time if you have additional questions or comments or need some additional support around evaluations. I'm going to see, John, can you look in your email and drop in the feedback form in the chat? So in just a moment, John is going to drop in a link to our feedback form for this afternoon. If you would please, number one, I'll follow back up if you did not complete the sign-in sheet, all right? But the link that's going to be dropped in here right now is going to be the actual feedback form for the day. And once you complete this one, you'll be emailed your ELA for the day. Okay, so John will drop that in just a moment, but I'm going to stop and see if anybody has any questions or thoughts or comments about our time together today. All right, so our internet got a little wonky here and it kicked us off on some things, but there you go. All right, so that is the Google feedback form. If you'll please access that. And while you're doing that, yes, I will drop the resource page link back in there again. And once you complete that feedback form, make sure you do that because that's how you're going to get your ELA certificate. So I do ask that you complete that this afternoon. And thank you all for joining and staying engaged. I know this is not always the best format, but I do appreciate you talking and engaging in the work. And I hope that you found something today that's going to help you in your role. Okay, so thank you all. As soon as you do that, you can hop off. Have a great rest of the day. And I will be dropping that link back in for the resource page.